Welcome. Welcome to Sue's University of Life, and I'm Sue Gaskell-Barlow, and it's a pleasure to spend some time with you here on one of my lives. One of the things that I find incredibly interesting as my life journey goes on is to see how people esteem themselves, whether they have a high self-esteem, a low self-esteem, narcissistic, or incredibly an inferiority, a guilt, a fear, irrational thinking from programming that actually creates and adds to their self-esteem. It's a subject very, very close to my heart, as over the decades I have learned more and more about self-esteem in the programming, in the ego, and the ways we respond and react in life. And so self-esteem, and what is self-esteem? What's your definition of self-esteem? Your definition. It became incredibly apparent when I was in my late 30s that things really weren't working for me and for people around me sometimes, because I felt responsible for everybody and everything, and had done since very early in my childhood. Now I understand that. And so, especially feeling responsible for how people felt, something that I picked up when I was a youngster, and something that I was so unhappy about when I upset someone, my dad in fact, when I was a really little girl. And I must have decided I must never ever hurt anybody again. And so my role, the way I acted out life, was to always look after other people's feelings to the detriment of my own. So self-esteem, what is self-esteem for me? My self-esteem revolved around me helping people, wanting them to like me, never hurting them, and always doing things that they wanted, to the point that I lost who I was completely. And as a consequence, I had a complete breakdown of the whole of my system. Everything within me collapsed, including my ability to function. I became agoraphobic and found it really hard as I went into deep depression, when I blamed myself for something which, looking back, was completely and utterly not mine to blame. I could only take responsibility for my part in it, and unfortunately I didn't know how to do that. And so as a consequence, deep depression set in. I mean deep depression, because I was in a cycle within my self-talk of guilt, fear, inferiority, and a self-esteem that had no recognition, and no way and no how could I learn to function. So it took some very deep inner work to begin to make sense of the self-talk within my head that was creating my low self-esteem, and then the irrational guilt I felt just fed that, and then the fear that nobody would like me and that I didn't matter, and what was the point in anything, led to my wanting to actually not wake up in the morning. I wanted the pain to stop. I didn't want to kill myself. I wanted the emotional and psychological pain to stop, which I now understand was created within myself, my self-talk, and therefore fed me with so much nonsense that of course there was no way that I could remotely value myself, because I had a deep sense of shame. I was ashamed of everything I was. The guilt fed that. What crime had I committed? That of caring too much for other people and not understanding that I mattered. And so my vestige of being able to cope was to do everything that other people wanted, so that they would either like me, they wouldn't scare me, they wouldn't reject me. And it doesn't take much working out that my life inside my internal chatterbox, my mind, was a nightmare that I really felt I would never ever wake up from. And of course, along with all that, you believe that other people think like you do. And so anything that I thought badly about people, because even that was like horrendous to the caring nature I had, then I didn't know what to do with that. So I'd project it elsewhere. And if somebody was looking at me, then in my head, what were they looking at me for? Why were they staring? And I created a defense mechanism within myself, which must have been very, very unpleasant. And of course, then I hated that. So it's an all consumption of all the fears that actually are so harmful. What's that got to do with self-esteem? Well, I hope you're beginning to understand a little bit about the way we're all programmed from childhood. We understand that more and more in this day and age. And the good news is you can change the way you think about yourself. You can change the words you say to yourself. You can resolve issues. It doesn't take years and years, not anymore. Just takes the ability to want to understand why you do what you do. The most important thing I can say on self-esteem is you matter. Every single one of us matters. Every human being matters. And we are inherently pure, loving energy. Spirit, which lives in the human body, and we have a human experience. A loving spirit, which is fractured in our first few years sometimes, and we begin to have a loving spirit cracked and fractured by the conditioning which creates fear. And in that spirituality and the way we live, there's our heart. We have to learn to like, accept and value ourselves. Well, if we've been given messages that we weren't important, that we were rude, we were dirty, we were this, we were that, you never amount to nothing, then there's nowhere to go with that except on a downward spiral until you learn, or life knocks you about so much you think, well, I've got to sort this out. Only you can do it. Nobody can do it for you. And so we begin to have a look at our journey, have a look at why we do what we do, and decide not to blame other people and ourselves, to try and look at taking responsibility for our part to play in anything that isn't working. I mean anything. You know, instead of pointing the finger and saying it's somebody else's fault, pointing the finger at our childhood, our parents, we didn't have this, we didn't have that, and staying in that place of victim mentality, we can actually say, you know, hang on, I'm going to take responsibility. I'm not going to wait for other people to feed my self-esteem the way I esteem myself. I'm going to start doing that from the inside out. I'm going to start talking kindly to myself. I'm going to watch the way I do talk to myself when things, things go wrong, right and wrong. We're into that now. When something happens and there's a disagreement. So how do you deal with that? Do you come out fighting? Have you the self-centre of opinions, having to be right and wrong, good and bad? or somebody else having to be proved that they're right, so you will concede, oh, okay. Or are you now ready to become your best friend, the best detective you can ever be within the self, and learn to look at why things happen the way they do? 3 in 1, mind, body and soul. The way we think, the body, the physical body, and the soul, the spirit. If we can begin to put these together from a place of love, then we're on to the right track, place of love, a place of safety, where we're now on the path, a path that builds our self-esteem, that helps us to understand things. And then the fear which takes us off course, we can go back on course because we recognise these feelings and thoughts that are just coming from a story we tell ourselves. I've mentioned this before and I'll mention it again. As you continue, I hope, to watch and learn from some of the lives, and there are many here and on my website that you can enjoy. It's all Sue's University of Life on all social media for me now, all lowercase and all S's. City is spelt with an S. Sue's, because it's mine, as in my name, and I created this simply for it to be University of Life, which is ours, because we're all part of the whole. And so Sue's University of Life is about looking after you, becoming your own best friend, and learning about relationships and self-esteem. We can talk about many topics. Boundaries are an incredible skill to acquire. Your own boundaries and other people's. It's looking at taking self-responsibility for everything we say and do. Love is an action, so think about everything you say. Is it kind? Would you like to receive what you're going to say? Try and put yourself in the other person's reality momentarily. If there's something that's not working for you, then sit down and think about it. Is there a solution? If there's a solution, that's wonderful. Solved. If there is no solution, you can pretty well check out that it's in your imagination, which is coming from your programming, your learned behaviour, your old patterns, and usually a trigger. And so if in your imagination you think somebody is not being kind to you, then ask yourself, is that me? Is that true? Have I done anything? And be kind to yourself with that investigation. If you really are concerned, and I say concerned, I'm not worried, that's another talk altogether. Fear and worry are not the same. Fear and concern are not the same. And so it's looking at this from the adult perspective, not the childish perspective that we were brought up on in terms of words and language. And so self-esteem, once I worked through all of the issues around self-esteem, and then I began to give myself credit, a little stroke. Ego likes a little stroke. However, then you come back to this nice place of love, acceptance, awareness. And this is when the heart comes in. The human heart is a machine. It has its own system of communication, and the self-talk we need to secure and learn is about being kind to ourselves, using different words and unlearning some that we were taught that, to be perfectly honest, are coming from the dinosaur age now. There is no need to ever put yourself down or anybody else. There's no need to be right. Would you sooner be right, or would you sooner be content and then happy? Again, happy and content are not the same. Being peaceful within the self. And what I found was, if you then gain a self-esteem, then if it's in the ego, the programming, the self-centre that you've now newly acquired, then you have to continue to feed that from the inside. And other people might continue to try and drag you down from the outside. So there's skills, things you can learn to protect yourself. And then it's a joyous thing to move away from the self-esteem altogether and to be in complete awareness, living your life in a very, very different way, in a way that's logical, rational, practical, compassionate, kind. Living more in the moment instead of in the past, in your head, where you're thinking of what happened, what could have happened, what should have happened, words that are no longer relevant. And again, those are words that I continue to educate people, and hopefully you will unlearn and learn the new words, the love language that feeds the inner soul and the human heart, and therefore you can grow and esteem yourself. So the heart and the spirit of love, they become one because we're all part of the whole. We come to this earth planet to learn our lessons, and our spirit needs to evolve so that we can be so peaceful inside that we can see the minute we're off balance, that we've gone into that old fear, that old, it's called negativity. And if we can begin to make sense of that, then we can quickly get back on track to be able to move forward in that place of love. And we can extend that once we've learned to accept and love ourselves, not in a self-centered, egotistical way, it's not the same, in awareness of the fact that we're all part of the whole, that there's a tiny part of pure loving energy in everyone, and you can put whatever name you want to that, which is connected to the whole. I choose the word God, not to be used lightly and not to be, it's so overused now. If that doesn't fit very well with you, put another O in and call it good. I choose to use good, kind, goodness, kindness, compassion, wisdom as the tools that I use for myself and to use in relationships with other people. And so I hope that this has been of some benefit to you. It's always really, really good when I see someone else subscribe. You ding the bell and that means that you'll be notified when I do the live. And in the near future, we'll be able to talk via text on here if that works and if it's what you want to do. And if you just leave a comment, I always get the comments. And I find that so inspiring that people are actually not only listening, they're actually maybe sharing with other people, and also that they want to contribute because we're all in this together. This earthly place, this world that we're now in for a very short time, is magical. And once you can understand that magical is within each one of us, when we remind ourselves and re-educate our thinking and our words, it's just the most beautiful place to be. And then we can use the imagination as we see children use it in a way that is the most helpful and the most kindest thing we can do for ourselves and each other and for the planet. So thank you for joining me here on Sue's University of Life, and I hope that you continue your journey, reflecting on love and the way you take responsibility and the way you ask yourself, would I like to be my own best friend? Am I somebody that really does care? Think about it. Bye for now.